afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Stephanie Maelli, and happy Veterans Day to all those that have served. I want to introduce Dr. Shirley Pomponi. She will be heading this roundtable, and we will be discussing women Navy divers.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm sitting up here with a group of amazing women. We're going to talk a little bit today about exploring leadership and resilience and innovation through Navy diving careers. And I've been asked to just state right up front that the views and the opinions that are expressed today by the panelists are theirs, and they do not represent the Navy. Okay, so just briefly, I'm going to go one by one, but just briefly. Can each of you briefly share a pivotal moment, I think they call them inflection points now, that shaped your decision to pursue a Navy diving career, especially given the unique challenges in your path? Let's start with you, Bobby.
Well, I didn't grow up thinking that I was going to be in the Navy. I went to college and got a degree in biology, and in my hometown of Normal, Illinois. So what do you do with a degree in biology in Normal, Illinois? Well, you join the Navy to see the world, and that's exactly what I did. But in 1981, it was unusual for a woman to, one, go to sea on a ship, because that was right after the Navy opened up auxiliary ships to women. So I went to my auxiliary ship. I was one of the first women to go to auxiliary ships. And I went to a submarine tender as a surface warfare officer, as you heard. And on submarine tenders, there was a dive locker, because we needed divers to do the underwater repairs on the submarines that were alongside being worked on the ship. And I realized then, as I was watching the divers, there was a young woman, a petty officer. Her name was Terry Reese. And I noticed that she was a part of the dive locker. She was an engineman, which was unusual, exactly, for a woman to be an engineman, let alone a diver engineman. And I noticed that she was a member of the dive locker. And that's when I first realized that women can be Navy divers. And it hit me that that's what I want to do. I loved being a surface warfare officer. I loved driving Navy ships, but I wanted to do even more. I wanted to be a Navy diver. And when I saw that there was a woman in our dive locker, I said, women can be divers, and that's the direction I want to go. And it just so happened that the diving officer on my ship had retired, and there was not a replacement ordered in for him. And I was able to convince my chain of command that I needed to be sent to dive school, and they agreed. It wasn't quite that easy, and I needed to qualify to be accepted into dive school before I could be sent there. And as everybody will attest here, I had to get into shape. I had to meet the qualifications, the exact same qualifications that the men had to meet in order to be accepted into dive school. And then once I got to dive school, I had to meet all the same standards that the men had to meet in order to graduate from dive school. And I was able to do that. It was one of the hardest things I ever had to do. And then I returned to my ship as the diving officer and completed my tour there. And that was the beginning of my 24-year career as a Navy diving officer.
Thanks, Bobby. Sarah, what made you want to be a Navy diver?
I wish mine was as profound as that. I went into it completely ignorant. At the time, only about 1.5% of the EOD community were women. I had no idea. During my freshman year of ROTC, you spend a month in the summer, a week with surface, a week with aviation, a week with submarines. And during surface week, we went to the EOD training unit. And the facilities we got to see were the chem bio facilities, and I was a chemistry major, and the underwater, and I was a triathlete. And I was like, that sounds way more fun than anything else the Navy's offering me. I'm going to do that. it didn't occur to me till much later, the challenges and what a big statement that was. But at the time, it was just, that was fun. And so that's what I did.
Thanks. Karen, what caused you to become a Navy diver?
Well, so for me, I actually went to the Naval Academy because I wanted to study oceanography. And my parents, when I was like in high school, cut out articles about, in 1984, the first woman was the valedictorian at the Naval Academy, and she chose oceanography, and she got to go to MIT and get a master's degree, and talked about all this great stuff she did oceanography all around the world. And I thought, oh, that's what I want to do. So I got into the Naval Academy, went to the oceanography, became an oceanography major, trained in oceanography. But at the same time, I had this love of scuba diving that had just really taken me over in high school. And so I joined the Scuba Club. And I trained through Patty. I did open water, advanced open water, rescue diver, and then I was working on master diver. And the instructor said, "Oh, why are you doing master diver?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, when you go in as a diver in the Navy, this means nothing. You have to do it all over anyway." So, and I thought, "Oh, well, I said, "You mean I can go do that in the Navy?" He was like, "Well, you should probably ask." So I did, and I talked to a bunch of SEALs that were at the Naval Academy, and they had workouts because, like everyone's talked about, we had to do the same thing. And I realized, oh, I was a great swimmer. I could do push-ups, I could do sit-ups, I could run, but I couldn't do one single pull-up. And so it took me 6 months to be able to do one pull-up, and then 6 months later, I could do 12. So I passed the screener. And at the same time, I was still doing oceanography. I did research projects, and in the end, I kind of thought, ooh, scuba divers are kind of a lot more fun, and nothing against oceanographers, honey. But the way it worked at the Naval Academy, commissioning, it doesn't work like that now, but the day that you choose what you're going to do, it's by your order of rank. So there were two things I wanted to do. I was like, well, either I'm going to go and do this master's degree that they have at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, which they only had one spot, or they had one spot for a special operations officer for a girl. I think it was like 10 for men, 1 for girls. I thought, okay, well, when I go up there, whichever one's available, that's the one I'm going to take. And the second girl, because I was 108th, so there was only 55 girls out of like 1,000. So I was tracking what everybody, what are they doing? What are they each picking? And so someone else took the oceanography, and I thought, well, you know what? Scuba diving is way more fun anyway. And so I took special operations, and within 1 month, I was down in Panama City. And it was a great choice, so I'm glad I did that.
So I have a follow-up question for you. What mindset allowed you to succeed as the lone woman in your Navy diving and salvage cohort, and how did you approach initial leadership challenges?
Yeah, so I think when you take on any challenge, when any person takes on any challenge, 90% of the battle is deciding that you're going to accomplish it. You're going to be successful. You decide ahead of time, this is what I'm doing. I don't care how hard it is. I'm going to make it happen. And if you can do that, the last 10% is then actually doing it, because you've already got the mindset that I am going to accomplish this. And so then you do it. There's no decision. No matter how hard it is, you do it. And so, for me, that was my mindset for everything that I did in the Navy. And I approached it all head on, and, I wanted it to happen, and I made it happen. And dive school was the same thing. And I was lucky there was one other woman, and she was actually a lieutenant. And so it was kind of, even, eventually they partnered us together. And so, we kind of gave each other support and said to each other, all right, we're making this happen. And, when I went out to the ship, it's a little harder because you're not in control of everything. And so I approached my leadership was mutual respect. So you show up out in the fleet. And for me, went to the Naval Academy, went to dive school. So I was literally probably 22 years old. I was an ensign, 0 experience. And so I showed up at the ship, and, I thought, I don't know what I'm doing. So I wasn't afraid to ask the chief, the petty officers, to get advice from them, because we mutually respected each other. I respected what they knew, and they respected my authority, right, is showing up as an officer. And the hardest challenge I had is not with the people that I worked with, but when you have someone in your chain of command who doesn't operate in that method. And unfortunately, I did have that experience. And, I gave respect to others because of their position of authority. And unfortunately, when it's not given back to you, it becomes a very toxic environment when it's based on demographic instead of your success rate. So, that was definitely tough. It became a toxic environment. But for me, I made sure that anyone I worked with who was a high achiever, a great success at what they were doing, worked hard, I made sure that they were celebrated, because any employee who is recognized and appreciated, and that's whether you're in business, in the military, or wherever, they love that, and they're going to work 10 times harder to maintain the goal and to keep that teamwork. So that's how I approached it.
Thanks. Lisa, what made you want to be a Navy diver?
My story is way simpler than everybody else. So my first duty station, well, when I first joined the Navy, it was, hey, pick a job that's non-traditional for a woman. That's being like corpsman, being a cook, administrative something. So I picked the Seabees. So I was already from the get-go, from the gate, I was already a non-traditional woman job. My first duty station was in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, I don't even know why I was there. I can't even recall. But I was at the airport. And there's leeward side and windward side. I was on the windward side. And I ran into a girl. She was wearing a camouflage top. Camouflage top, our traditional, our UDTs, little brown shorts, boots, and literally a half bag filled of, like a sea bag half filled on her shoulder, sea bag, like literally a sea bag drag through the airport. And I go, excuse me, it's like, what job do you do in the Navy that you could dress like that and walk around and at the airport? And she's like, oh, I'm an EOD girl. I was like, what's EOD? It's like, oh, I do demolition stuff. I just dive, no big deal. It's like, we just come here every once in a while, we do training, and we just leave. I was like, oh, so you get to travel around the world, dress like that, work out, get paid. It's like, I want to be on that team. And that's literally, it was just like that. She was, I think her name was Melissa Tackett. I think. I never.
Oh, yeah.
So I never really.
Not surprised.
Right.
Yeah.
I did not get to actually talk to her after the fact about my memory, but I think it was her. And
That's great.
but it was just like that. It's like, I want to be like her. And that's a lot of the things you do. That's how you get inspired, right? Like, I want to do what she's doing. I want to do what he's doing. That's what I want to be. And she was a good role model for me for that day, because ever since that day I saw her, it's like, that's the job I want to do. And it was just like that. And then, well, come to find out, at that time in the Seabees, there was no female Seabee divers. I didn't even know the Seabees even had diving program. So I was literally trying to cross-rate to a fleet diving, or like to become a rating to become a Navy diver. But once I got back to the stateside, I went on one of the deployments with the NMC before, when I was in a battalion, and I met the first Seabee divers. I was like, huh? There's like, Seabees could be a diver? I was like, yeah. I was like, do you have girls? Like, can girls be a diver? Like, I think we have one girl right now, and that's it. It's like, okay then. So it was just like that. I was like, so I pulled my fleet transfer package, and I said, forget all that, rip that up, and I'm going to be a Seabee diver, and the rest is the history, kind of thing.
So I have a follow-up question.
Yes, ma'am.
As the first African-American woman Seabee diver, what personal or systemic barriers did you face, and how did you navigate them?
Good questions. Fortunately, just in my Seabee career, I never really had an issue being Black, being girl, being that. They just took me as, my work spoke for itself. However, in the fleet side, when it started from the dive school. When I went to dive school, we had, at that time, we had a fleet diving divers, and the Seabees were joined with the fleet divers. We're integrated class. So not only was the Seabees, or we call it the bastard childs of the construction force of the Navy, you know, they're like, oh, who's those Seabee guys? You know, so we're already like, you know, frowned upon. Not really, but it's because they just didn't know us, and they just didn't know any better. We were a bunch of cool guys. But you know, so I go to dive school. I'm already a Seabee, so I'm already not with the fleet. And then on top of that, I was a female. Then and just, you know, then, you know, how my demographic, I was a Black female. So I had like a triple whammies. So the name of the game is in dive school, the first part of the dive school for me was to blend in and survive. Well, that was not happening. So that avenue, track avenue, was already like not there for me. However, that's how I kind of try to survive, you know. And then once they got to know me, oh, she can do pull-ups. Oh, she could run. Oh, she's dragging those guys, just, you know, like holding onto their UDTs and dragging the guys with her while we're running to the back 40s. So after that, so it's you know, it's a learned respect. So did I earn it? Heck yeah, I did, you know. But did I needed to do that? Does the guys need to do that? No, they didn't. They were just among one of the 500 guys that was there, but I was the one special one. So my survival game was to try to blend in, do my part, carry my load, and you know, and just try to survive, and I did. But nowadays I don't have to survive, so which is good. So, you know, I heard about you, I read about you. So it's like everything you read is
You're
heard.
the inspiration.
Yes, like everything you heard is probably true. So, but yeah, that's how I survived, is just trying to do what I need to do and survive and blend in. So.
The next segment, we're going to talk about leading in crisis and high-stakes operations, and we've all had experience doing that. I'm going to start first with Bobby. How has commanding high-profile recovery operations, for example, TWA Flight 800, the USS Cole, shape your philosophy on crisis leadership and teamwork under pressure?
Kind of like what Lisa said, you get into these small elite communities like the diving community, the CB community, and you have to establish your reputation, your profile. And that's the beauty of the diving community, is that you get in there, you show respect, like Karen said, and you earn respect by showing respect and earning it back. You do your job, and you take care of your people. And I had been in the diving community for several years in leadership positions, in command positions. By the time I was involved in TWA Flight 800 in 1996, I'd already had command of the ship, and I was in a leadership position during TWA Flight 800 back in 1996. Some of you may remember that. It was a 4-month operation off the coast of Long Island, and several of my shipmates out here in the audience were up there with us for 4 months. And it was a very large operation with lots of Navy divers, interagency, many other agencies, NTSB, the FBI, and the National Transportation Safety Board, lots of other diving organizations, law enforcement, and so forth. And so operating with a lot of other Navy divers. I was involved in that for quite a while, kind of in a higher leadership position, but also working with a lot of divers and a little bit closer. So fast forward to October of 2000, I was headed off to my second command tour as the CO of Mobile Diving and Salvage Unit 2. October of 2000, what should happen? The USS Cole was pulling into the port of Aden in Yemen, and it was bombed by a suicide terrorist bomb in a small boat. And I had just reported to Mutsu 2, and I hadn't even officially taken command, but Mutsu 2 had a detachment of divers, already forward deployed in Sigonella, and when the Cole was bombed, they moved that detachment of divers from Sigonella to Yemen to help support the USS Cole in recovering the sailors that were killed and missing below the waterline, and also to help stabilize the ship so it wouldn't sink. And my chain of command decided that they needed a senior officer there with the detachment of divers. I was, the incoming commanding officer, so they sent me to Yemen as well to be there with the detachment. So here I was, the brand new commanding officer who hadn't even met the crew yet of my new command, and they were sending me forward deployed to Yemen in a environment that had just had a terrorist bombing on a US naval warship, and I was supposed to go over there and, take charge of my 12-man diving detachment that I hadn't met yet. And, I had a reputation already in the diving community, but I hadn't met, I haven't taken command, and I was going into a pretty hostile environment. So how do you handle that leadership scenario? Well, fortunately, the officer in charge of that detachment was Chief Warrant Officer Frank Perna, who I had worked with during TWA Flight 800 when he was a master diver. So that was a plus. Small community, small tight-knit community. I hadn't worked with him very closely, but we had worked together. So, it does help in a tight-knit community because you show respect to the people you work with, no matter what the environment is, no matter what the scenario is, no matter where you're working, when you're working with them, and you earn respect in your community. And that works no matter what type of business you're in, because you never know when you're going to work with those people again. You never know when you're going to need to draw on those people to have your back, and that's no matter what you do on dive station. You're always going to have their back, you're always going to need them to have their back. And we did our job in Yemen. We were there for several weeks, and we did what needed to be done, and we brought our dive team home safely.
Thanks, Bobby. Sarah, can you recall a moment from your underwater mine disposal or post 9/11 projects where leadership and adaptability were put to the test?
So I'll say that I don't think it was mission specific. I'll say something a little bit crass, and I hope people can laugh about it when I say it, but in EOD, you ask somebody from EOD about the stress of disarming an IED or a bomb, and the response is, I'm either right or it's somebody else's problem. So the idea is you trust your training, right? So the leadership and adaptability challenges that I was up against was never the IED. It was never the piece of ordnance. It was always something else that you had to trust your training on the mission to deal with whatever the other thing was. So I can think of a time, second deployment on the Grapple, we were demining a tugboat that was militarized to lay mines. And so we were demilitarizing it, removing all the ordnance from it. And I ended up having, at the time, some pretty significant personnel clashes on the team. And so it wasn't about whether or not the individuals could do the job. It was making sure that that was sort of simmered down so that they concentrated on the job I knew they could do. Similarly, my most recent deployment to Afghanistan started March of 2020. So I'm going out to Afghanistan to be the force protection officer. Donald Trump had just signed a peace agreement with the Taliban, and COVID was a global pandemic. I was the force protection officer for a special operations joint task force. So we were the only ones in theater allowed to continue to do actions because we were doing actions against ISIS, not the Taliban. So I get over there and it was, you're in charge of all of these small little bases in Afghanistan and the force protection equipment on them. And oh, by the way, I need you to figure out how our Green Berets and our SEALs go out on combined mission with Afghan special forces and come back to that base without getting or spreading COVID. So again, that leadership and adaptability, it wasn't about the mission. It was about trusting that we've all trained to do the mission, and then how do you work with the skill sets, the tool sets, and the individuals you have on the team to answer that other question. That is really what comes down to the adaptability.
Let's move to some comments about navigating change from Navy to new frontiers. We'll start with Karen. How did your transition from military service to academia and entrepreneurship reflect lessons that you learned from Navy diving?
Sure. So when I eventually got out, I stayed in the reserves. And I went to Scripps and studied underwater acoustics. And, in the Navy, you're always underwater as a diver, right? That's where we operated. And I learned an appreciation for understanding the ocean and what the profile was of where we were diving, right? How much light there was going to be and temperature changes and how that affected your equipment. So when I decided to go back to school and study, I studied underwater acoustics, and I supported the military and the Navy in that endeavor, helping them with some projects that they had. And I think it helped me understand that this was real world scenarios that had an application. Besides, it was great to do science for science sake, but also you can do science to help the world or help your military. And so I could apply that knowledge and kind of help my team too. And, also divers, I think, as Bobby and Sarah and Lisa all have mentioned, is that we all work together, right? A big thing you say is, oh, does that person play well in the sandbox, right? So you learn to play well in the sandbox, and then when you get out in the real world, you can apply that same principle to work well with your team, whether you own a pet sitting business or you own your own consulting business, or you're working with the team trying to do some great science. So those are some of the biggest things that I applied.
It's interesting because you came to it from being in the applied field where you were actually using the knowledge that was being produced by academicians, for example.
Yes.
We're able then to go back and say, okay, this is why I'm doing it.
Right, exactly. And I could, also tell my team if we were having an issue, be like, no, this is really, this is important.
Really how we use these data.
Right, exactly.
Lisa.
Yes.
What best practices from NAVFAC and CB operations could benefit civilian underwater engineering and STEM initiatives?
It's perfect, because at NAVFAC, I must do a tour once a month for all the STEM kids. I call it the STEM kids. And we have a local school that hosts the STEM program, and they come through our different warfare centers that's around Port Hueneme beaches. And one of the stops that we have is the deep ocean simulation facility, which is the lab that I help run, which is a laboratory that simulates a deep ocean. So you could put test a pressure vessel. Before you put that $1 million electronics in there, you got to test the container. So they bring it to our shop, and we could simulate at the depth of our biggest 72-inch vessel, which is one of the biggest one in the West Coast that the Navy owns. We could pressure down to 12,000 and some change of seawater. We also have a small pressure vessel that runs down to 35,000 feet. So that's a full ocean depth. So we have a test facility. So the STEM kids come and they're like, hey, what do you do here? It's like, well, we test stuff. It's like, okay. But like the big thing I try to teach the STEM kids is that every idea, good idea, you might be the owner of the good idea, but guess what? You're going to have a teammate to make that good idea come into fruition. So, and like in NAVFAC, we have a NAVFAC facility, which is the Engineering and Expeditionary Warfare Center. However, within our oceans department, we have electrical engineer, we have a mechanical engineer, we have a drafting person, we have a geographer, oceanographer. We have all kinds of entities that comes to become your team, right? So from my cardboard box drawing, because I couldn't find a piece of paper to prototype I once prototyped a bracket system for a zinc for a split pipe for preservation of the undersea cable that we laid. All I had was a Sharpie and a cardboard box. So I drew it all out on the cardboard box. But then I have a chance to take it to my teammate, which is an engineer, say, hey, can you make sure that this thing would actually work, fits on this thing, and can you make me a drawing that I could actually manufacture this thing? And it's like, no problem. Then I take that drawing and I take it over to my other friend that's a mechanical engineer. It's like, hey, can you make sure that all the specs are good, that we could buy in American made, yada, yada, yada. So the long story short is that within NAVFAC is that we build upon teamwork. And you need that teamwork to make anything happen, right? It's just like in diving, in a diving station, in a Navy diving, it's not just that one diver. You have minimum dive side requirement for a reason. You have your dive buddy, you have a master diver, you have a corpsman, you have all this guy that's running the chamber. So that's what I always instill on these kids that, or any profession, it's like you have to learn how to work with a team. Because no matter what your good idea is, without a team, it's not going to come to fruition. And that's how utilize the NAVFAC team for the STEM programs and stuff like that.
What's the age range in the STEM?
Most of the students are between like ninth grade,
So high school.
age kids that they come and they have different kind of they want to be a astronauts kind of thing. They want a rocket scientist to be a solar electrical engineer and things like that. So we have a whole vast of kids. It's like different engineering professions that they come and they kind of figure out. And then we have a very success rate with the STEM kids where we have they come back as an intern.
Mm.
So
Nice.
so our program is very pretty renowned.
Sarah,
Yes,
how did your experience in military diving shape your work in sports and inclusion for people with disabilities?
So sailors and adaptive athletes actually have a lot in common. They are stubborn. They are insular. They're women. Insular and they don't necessarily readily accept somebody they consider an outsider. And so I found that the stubbornness provides both the drive to succeed and often can result in decisions that don't necessarily benefit them. And so learning about that aspect of adaptive athletes and being able to go, okay, I've seen this in my sailors, and go, okay, how do you tell somebody just because you can doesn't mean you should? That type of thing. And then also, because they are insular, leaning on what I have learned from master techs and master divers and that willingness to be in charge without knowing everything opened me up to and allowed me to be vulnerable with my adaptive athletes. So it wasn't me saying, this is how you do things. It was me asking, what does your specific disability mean for this? And then let's figure it out together. And so there's a lot of parallels there between sailors and adaptive athletes.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yep.
Bobby, which lessons from Navy diving best translate to the work you're doing in veteran support and nonprofit leadership?
Well, one of the first things I had to unlearn from my time being in the Navy diving, or being a leader in Navy diving, before I transitioned into nonprofit, is that in the nonprofit world, you're working with volunteers, so you can't order them to do anything, which you might remember, Shirley, when I came on the board. So I had to unlearn some things. But the other thing that...
Pretty effective. Put together a standard operating procedure. It's like, man, nobody's ever asked us to do that.
I know. And they didn't throw me off the board.
No.
But the one thing that I think did translate well was that in the Navy diving world, you know, I think the thing that I did learn was if you take care of your team, they're going to do anything for you. I think that was alluded to already. And in the diving world, a dive team can accomplish anything. And I think that was proven over and over and over again in my career. Anything that I asked the dive team to do, pretty much they did. And my responsibility was to take care of that team, to take care of those divers, and they would do anything for you. And I think that translates well into what I try to do in the nonprofit world, is if we can take care of what we're trying to do, take care of the people that we're trying to work for, and then we can accomplish the mission that we want to do. And no matter what that mission is, what type of work you're trying to do in the nonprofit world, if you look at those people that you're trying to do that work for and you humanize them, and you make sure that whatever your goal is in the nonprofit world, that these are people and you need to take care of them, then you can accomplish anything. And that's kind of the goal that I take away. You can talk about teamwork and all that kind of stuff, which is absolutely true, but it all kind of comes down to humanizing the team, humanizing what the mission is and the people, and that's your most valuable asset.
Thanks. We only have a few minutes left, and I would actually be remiss if I didn't ask a question that's kind of the elephant in the room. Has to do with diversity, mentorship, future. And I'd like to get your perspective about how the culture of Navy diving has evolved regarding inclusion and technical innovation, but also keeping in mind some of the more recent developments. And I know what each one of you is going to say, because you've already said it. You have to do the same exact training as the men. So you don't have to say that, because we know that that's the case. But what's your perspective about how the culture of Navy diving has evolved, and especially with regard to inclusion, technical innovation, and I'm going to say equity as well? Let's see, who would like to start? Sarah. And remember what I said earlier. These are the opinions of the panelists. They're not.
So culture's hard to
secretary.
change.
Yes, it is.
It takes a long time and a concerted effort at all levels of leadership to change culture. When I joined EOD, like I said, there was about 1.5%. We're up to 3% in EOD women. Yeah. In fact, women were allowed into subs decades after they were allowed into EOD, and they've already surpassed us in percentages. But what I have felt over the years is the individuals I work with coming into the community with a very different perspective. They come into the community, especially our more junior officers and junior enlisted, without any preconceived notions. And so what you hear on the news, what you hear about, unfortunately, some of our absolutely stellar female leaders being relieved of duty, is top down. And so I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm seeing right now a culture change within the Navy. what I'm seeing is an attempt to change culture at the highest levels, and if it extends over time, you'll see it. But again, culture change is hard. It takes a very long time, and it has to happen at all levels. And I'm just not seeing it from, I would even say, the 1 and 2 star level down. So.
Would anyone else like to? Thanks. Yeah.
I got one. This is in terms of equipment. Okay, back in the days when let me preface this with I'm a retiree now, but I still dive with the active duty Navy as a civil servant for the government. So within the evolution of the time I started till now, in the beginning it was you get the gear, you're lucky if it fits. If it doesn't fit, suck it up, kind of thing. You know, I personally have a near drowning experience from equipment not fitting correctly. And they call it near drowning is because I just didn't drown and die. But it was due to the fact that, you know, they didn't account for, you know, our female bodies are built different. We don't have size 28 neck, you know, so our neck dam didn't fit and things like that. But as the time progressed, the Navy has been accommodating to and realizing that, okay, women, no matter, regardless of what we can do or cannot do, we are built different. Okay, maybe she needs her own neck dam that'll fit, that's not cut like 5 times to fit the big guys with big necks and things like, so they do take
Just like the smaller guys.
yeah,
might need
right.
something
You know, I
smaller.
like until I had a near drowning, I didn't even know the oronasal mask. I thought it was just size XL the whole time, but they actually come in different sizes. If you didn't know, they do come in different sizes. So things like that, the Navy has recognized that there is some safety issues that if we don't change with the program, with the you know, with our entities, that we can have a tragic ending. So they have been allocating, okay, make sure that, you know, we have different sizes. And it's not just, oh, you know, let's get size small for Lisa, but hey, there are some big guys, or there are some Navy divers that are about my size, you know. So I say, hey, maybe we need to accommodate a couple more different sizes to safe fit for the equipment to accomplish our jobs. And those are the things that I've noticed that from the time I started, it was not accounted for. It really didn't matter. But nowadays, I notice it. You know, they have different size BCs, and little simple things that you didn't even, you know, consider, because it was like, you know, all you wanted to do was get in the water, get the job done. You didn't even care if it fit or not, because that's mission first kind of situation. But now it's safety first. So I do appreciate the Navy taking the time, or the leadership, you know, to recognize that change and accepting the change. So those are some of the accommodations that I believe that has evolved.
So I know we'd like to hear much more from these Navy women divers, but we're running out of time, unfortunately. I'm getting the signal from Stephanie that we're short on time. Bobby, did you want to say?
I would like to thank Stephanie and SDI for all the support that they have given us, not just for this seminar, but from all the support prior to DEMA and throughout the week that they have given us in helping us celebrate our 50th anniversary. Thank you, Stephanie and SDI.